This past Thursday, I had a little powwow, a little debate interview with Ed Dutton. Okay, and as usually happens in these cases, there's a little bit of interview, there's a little bit of debate. Not everybody sees eye to eye on all issues, so we don't have the same foundations on which we build our theories, and that creates a little bit of a problem because the interviewer is supposed to question you, and that's okay. But then if there are many questions, we all go on tangents, and we end up doing a lot of tangents. We get lost on the big picture. We don't really know everything that had to go on. You don't answer all the questions that you were supposed to, or address all the issues. And that's just the nature of the beast. You probably would need 15 hours to cover every point on which, to make sure that each point is covered and every base is set so that everybody can follow the whole presentation. Okay, so Mr. Ed Dutton, this differed with me in at least three issues. There were more that we did not see eye to eye on, I'm sure. But these were three that I kind of pulled out of the conversation that I had with him. Very interesting. First one where we do not see eye to eye on is that he said that survivors will reproduce and restart population expansion. Assuming there's a global economic collapse, which is what I'm proposing. The question is, will there be some survivors? And my guess, and I guess his guess as well, is if that happens, the global economic collapse happens, there will be some survivors. And the question is whether they will reproduce and restart the race. That's the question. And this comes from, I think, in a lot of these anarcho-capitalists. I call them narco-caps. And they have this idea that it's a good deal if the world collapses, the world economy collapses. And you say, what? You want the world economy to collapse? And they would say yes, a lot of them would, because they think it's a reshuffling of global economics. We erase the board and start all over again with the fact that, we know history, we know what happened in the past. We get rid of all the lousy politicians, maybe the military, and you do your own thing, entrepreneurship where you just trade with your neighbor and you have no taxes, no government on top of you. This is the notion a lot of these people have. And so they see it as a good thing, let the global economy collapse once and for all and let's restart the whole thing over. And so that's where some of these questions or disagreements start. And so he says survivors will reproduce and restart population expansion. And I'm saying no, when the global economy collapses, that's it for mankind. There will be no restarting of anything. And so these are some of the points that I want to address regarding that issue. Okay, let's start with that one first. Family survives. See, you got to look at this in every city. What's going to happen in a city? Okay, and a million people, they'll all kill each other or leave the city and look for food in the country, whatever. There won't be many survivors in the city. Whoever's there, whoever ends up being king of the mountain, has to be maybe a family, someone who trusts someone else. And maybe you're talking about 10, 15 people at most, I would think. And that family, for some reason, survived, managed to tough it out, beat out all competitors. And you have to beat out every single one because you're going to be planting and you don't want to leave anyone out there, stealing or from your agriculture or destroying your crops to create problems for you. No, you have to kill them. It can only be one king of the mountain. There's only one family or group that survives. And so that's the first issue you got to look at. Okay, it's not like we're going to be friendly with our neighbors or anything like that. Everybody's going to be an enemy of everybody else. Everybody will understand that immediately. Okay, now all of humanity has collapsed as far as you're concerned. You're the last humans on Earth, this group, right? And so you're going to already have a big psychological impact in that group. You're going to look at the world and say, we're the last humans on Earth. So there's also already going to be a psychological impact there. Okay. Think of that situation. Think of it as if you were the last group of people living in a city. There's no one miles around, okay? And you're going to do subsistence agriculture. That means you're not going to be a nomad because you're not going to be doing hunting. There will be nothing to hunt. You don't see wildebeest running down the highway today, do you? So there's nothing to hunt, okay? All the hunting has been done. We've killed all the humans as far as you're concerned. So you're going to be planting if you survive. And if you plant, you're going to be sedentary. There's going to be no one near you, by you, and near you. Okay, so you're going to have no electricity, no water, no internet, none of that. Okay, so keep all these things in mind. You're going to go into subsistence farming. Hopefully, you are a farmer or you have some farming experience and you're not an office person. You're not an internet entrepreneur because you probably know nothing about planting. Okay, so that's another thing you got to keep in mind. And so these people say this group is going to reproduce and restart the human race again. Well, I don't know. I have a lot of problems with that because, first of all, women don't reproduce today, much less will they reproduce after the collapse when they're the last humans on Earth, this little party that's there that survived the whole Holocaust. And so the issue is, they don't have children today when they have doctors, they have hospitals, they have all the care that they want. And now they're going to have children in the streets, more or less, no one to help them. It's just push the baby out. Hopefully everything's okay, no cesarean or anything like that. So I don't know. I don't know if a woman will want to put herself in that situation as well. I mean, the old days they did it, but the women today, they're not prepared for that kind of stuff. Okay, out in the caves, I don't think so. Then let's assume someone reproduces. That group will have no genetic diversity. No. I mean, it's probably a family, people who know each other or are very closely related, and we already have humanity doesn't have any genetic diversity, let alone a group within humanity. So let's assume they reproduce. What's going to happen 2-3 generations later? Well, they're going to start growing 6 fingers. That's what's going to happen. They'll come out wrong because they came out of this founders effect, this group that founded the new colony. So it can't go on for many generations when it will collapse. That group will collapse. So that's another reason they probably would not have any children. They would just live out their lives. That's it. And lost the birthing habit. Women don't have children today. Why would they have children later on when, what's the purpose of having a child? Just to see what it looks like? Just to make that child? What woman will want to have the last child on Earth? As far as she's concerned, that is the last child on Earth. And will she have 2 or 3? What, so that they can intermarry, inbreed? I doubt it. So think about these things. And then, brother will marry sister, essentially, because it's the same group. Is that what's going to happen with all genetic diversity essentially gone? I don't think it's going to last too long. And they think of this as not the end, but as the beginning. And I doubt very much that's how you're supposed to look at this. No, when the global economy collapses, that's it for mankind. Okay, so I don't think they'll be reproducing or doing anything along those lines. Okay, next issue, more or less along the same lines, because he questioned, how about all these tribes out there, lost tribes that are not in contact with civilization? And a lot of people have raised these issues in the past with me. They say, well, what about the lost tribes? They're not in contact with us. And so I think they've got the wrong reasoning there. First of all, there are no lost tribes. We found them all. Okay, we know we've got satellites. For those of you who are not flat earthers, we can see a matchbox from the sky here on the ground. Okay, and so they know where everybody is on planet Earth. Now there are groups out there which have no relation to humans. To civilized humans. But what happens? Those hunter-gatherers, they'll be the first to go. I'm saying that we will kill them first. Why? Because if you look at a city that is close by to these jungles or where these people live, they'll be invading their hunting grounds first to get something to eat. And then they'll be hunting the less technologically advanced tribes. They'll kill them all. So I think it's the other way around. The first people to go will be the lost tribes. Okay, the Amish. People say the Amish, they're great people. They do farming. They're very skilled. Yeah, that's why they're going to die. They're the first to go. Why? Because they don't pay they don't pay for a security. They don't have a defense budget. They take that one for granted. And right now their defense budget consists of the courts, police, the army maybe. They're protected. And who's going to protect them once all that's gone? No, everybody's just going to invade their lands and just steal whatever they want out of there. It's going to be like the locusts swarming over the land. That's what it's going to be like. So lost tribes, Amish, all those will be the first to go. They have no protection whatsoever from what's protecting them now. In fact, the Indian government, the group that I talked about a couple of weeks ago, the Sentinel Island, It's the Indian government that's got to protect them, because otherwise other people would go in there and do all kinds of things there, which are, again, they have more knowledge, they have helicopters, they have guns. They would slaughter these people very easily. So the Indian government protects them. All these lost tribes are under protection right now. They will not have that protection later on. Okay, but the one that concerns me the most is the last one that I'm sure we didn't see eye to eye on, and that's that humans have more genetic diversity today than in the 19th century. That's how Dutton looks at this, and I think he conceded that we lost genetic diversity since the human race started. So if you go back 200, 300,000 years ago, and you work your way upwards to where we are today, we lost genetic diversity over the centuries, over the millennia. And if that's the case, then how is it that we recovered or we increased our genetic diversity since the 19th century? And of course, we didn't see eye to eye on that one. And all I can do is smile. What can I say? If you don't agree, right? And I'm saying you cannot recover genetic diversity. Okay, this is a little graph that I made. It's in my book, okay, on the Neanderthal book there, and gives you an idea of why we can only lose any species, for that matter, can only lose genetic diversity. It can never gain genetic diversity. Human population versus genetic diversity, and that's over time, okay? And I'm saying that mutations increase genetic diversity, but periodic population crashes. In other words, diseases, wars, etc., natural selection chops off genetic diversity. Big chunks of humanity die in wars and disease, and whatever little you gained, you lost in these big choppings. And so it's like this sawtooth wave. It's big crashes, and you have what is known as a founder's effect, followed by another crash, a population bottleneck of some kind, and then another crash, and so on down the line. And so all you're doing is streamlining the genetic diversity of humans from the moment that they began to inbreed. Okay? So we've been inbreeding, 200, 300,000 years? We should have very little genetic diversity in us. And this is hard for these people to believe because, the geneticists have told them something else, that we gain genetic diversity because of mutations. And it's like, okay, so we gain, and what did we lose? And I'm saying we lost a lot more through founder's effect and population bottlenecks. And this is what these people still have not caught on to. I don't think there's a single geneticist on planet Earth which will agree with me that we have only lost and we can only lose, any species can only lose genetic diversity over time. Okay? And if you add to the founder's effect and the population crash, the bottleneck, okay, if you add the fact that there's also inbreeding for all this time, that can only worsen the situation. And I'll just give you these examples here. You've got a fellow named Charles II. He was of the Habsburg family, okay, and King of Spain. And he was known as El Hechizado, the Bewitched, okay. And why? Because, well, he was born with all kinds of problems. And, he had the famous Habsburg chin, which he inherited at least as far back as his great-great-great-grandfather, 5 generations back, which was Charles I, known as Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire, Charles I of Spain. Okay? And they had this Habsburg chin, and it's because they kept intermarrying, inbreeding within the family. And we had the same situation with the Romanovs. And you have Alexei Romanov. He was great-grandson of Queen Victoria. And there were 9 people within the Victorian family that had hemophilia. And he was one of them. And so, and it's because of inbreeding. You have the same thing with the Amish. The Amish have been inbreeding for 300 years. They came to America, like 500 of them. I have the dates there, 1717 to 1750. And in 300 years, they multiplied to 330,000 approximately that they are today. And for the most part, all these people just been inbreeding and come from that stock. So what do you think they have today? Well, they have a lot of genetic problems. What? Genetic problems. Okay, ailments or disorders, whatever you want to call them. And we've been inbreeding for what? 200, 300,000 years, assuming those skulls, the Homo and the Idalta and so on, are part of our lineage, which is probably likely because their skulls are very similar to ours. Okay, So assuming those are our ancestors, our predecessors, we've been inbreeding for 200,000 years. And what do you think is going to come out of there, especially with all these bottlenecks and founders effect, bottlenecks, founders effect? Well, what you're doing is whittling our genetic pool. And today we're all clones of each other. I mentioned the other day, and I mentioned this several times because people don't seem to pick up on that. There's a study, and here's a study that says that a pack of chimps, a troop of chimps, maybe 100 of them, that live together and have sex within the group, have more genetic diversity than all the human race. All the human race, 8 billion of us. And it was surprising to the people who investigated this, and they said, how can that possibly be? If here we are, so many of us, 8 billion people, why would a pack of chimps, have more diversity than us? And of course, the geneticists have no clue why that's the case. And I'm telling you, the case is that all you can do throughout history, from the moment you begin inbreeding, is lose genetic diversity due to, again, founders effect and bottlenecks, and also inbreeding. And so here, we have a pack of chimps that have more diversity than all of the human race. And it's like people don't understand what this means. This is very important. It's very important because it shows that genetic diversity is a function of time. So you want to know if a species is old or new? Find out how much diversity it has. If it has a lot of diversity, it's a new species. It started a few thousand years ago, perhaps. If it's got very little genetic diversity, such as the sheep, it's because they have a long line in which they've been inbreeding for who knows, maybe 100,000, 200,000 years. And today they've lost their genetic diversity. So I'm saying that if you go back in time, you can figure out, how old a species is just by looking at how much genetic diversity it has. And again, Mother Nature doesn't look at a species age, right, only through how many times the Earth went around the sun. Okay? Looks at how much inbreeding there was and how many diseases you went through and how quickly your population expanded. So there are other factors that you got to consider there, all that taken together. And again, I talk about that in my book, on the Neanderthal book, in more detail. Okay, so here's my take on that. And I'm not asking people to agree with me or to believe in this. I'm just saying this is my take on this. Okay, you take it for what it is worth to you. I'm saying this is the law of genetic diversity. Okay, a species, once it branches off from the mother trunk, it begins to gain genetic diversity because it meets different environments, different diseases, different animals, and so it conditions its genetics to that new world in which it's going through. And in the case of Neanderthals, they came certainly out of the Heidelbergs, or the ancestors which came before them, who in turn came from Homo erectus. Okay, so if you have a Homo erectus who a pack or a family or a clan, whatever, going west, and they started to live in Arctic weathers, and then from that group, what branched out were the Heidelbergers, okay, and then from that group, another group branched out, and they became the Neanderthals, all in Europe, Arctic Europe. Well, up to that point, they were increasing their genetic diversity from one species to the next. But what happens after that? Once they settle down, they become more or less sedentary. They don't, move to warm climates or whatever. Then after that, all they can do is lose genetic diversity. Okay? And eventually they end up at a point where they get used to endemic diseases, the diseases which would have killed their forefathers, no longer kill them. And the reason for that is that, all the people who had no defenses are already gone. Okay? They didn't leave any offspring. So disease is a big sifter of genetics, of the genetic pool, and streamlines our genetic pool. So after millions of years, thousands of years, hundreds, thousands of years, millions of years, you end up with a species that has no genetic diversity. And one of the big animals today, the cheetahs, have very, very little genetic diversity. I think it's the number one with the least amount of diversity out there. And this gives you an idea that cheetah has been around for quite a while. Inbreeding, grew fast, very successful animal. The more successful it is, the shorter its lifespan. We were very successful, so we only lived 200,000 years. Dinosaurs were horribly successful, and so they lived 2 million years, much more than we did. And so you got to keep all these things in mind. Mother Nature handles these things, not, again, how many times the Earth goes around the sun. You got to factor some other issues there. And today, here's an example of animals that have lost their genetic diversity. They're known as the lions. And here's a weird thing that you'll find among them. This is a female lioness, and she's got a mane like a lion. Okay? I think that's another one there. I'm not sure if it's the same one. But the point is, we're starting to see creepy things in the world of lions. Why? Because they lost their genetic diversity. I keep saying that there were like 150,000 lions only 30, 40 years ago, and there's only 35,000 today. So the population has shrunk, and within that, obviously, the genetic diversity has had to shrink. You're not going to get more and more diversity with fewer and fewer population, especially when there's been such drastic cuts in their population. Okay? So keep all this in mind. So yeah, we don't agree on a lot of things, and so it's very hard to get to the bottom of the theory unless you see eye to eye, at least in some of these things, or they're clarified. That's one issue. The other one I always recommend is that we do Extinction 101 before we do Extinction 102. Okay, let's look at some of the issues that some people raised regarding extinction and in Neanderthals and so on. One fellow says, there was a case of a wolf boy in Cuba, talking about the appearance here, that got the attention and love of quite a lot of girls, and I assume women, when he grew up. Okay, I guess he's talking about Little Red Riding Hood, seeing, Grandma, what big teeth you have, Okay, and he says essentially, there are women go after ape men, men that look like apes, etc. Okay, and men going after anything that moves. Okay, we have these notions out there, these Hollywood-esque 21st century notions, and you make a big error when you compare that to what happened in the Paleolithic. Totally different context. People are just mixing things up. They think that since humans today, you see videos there of men who go behind a cow, and do their thing. I don't think that happened in the Paleolithic, okay? But today, we have all these weird things. We have triple X, and people are oversexed and so on. So they have all this leisure time to think about sex, and so they think of weird things. And I'm not sure sex was that complicated in the days of the Paleolithic. I think it was just, I've got the feel. And you go to your squaw and you say, okay, get down. I think it was more simple in those days, sex. Today we have a very complicated world. We're bombarded by sex every morning, and so, you can think of anything you want. But anyways, he was getting to the following. He says, so theoretically, it's conceivable that humans might be open to getting it on with Neanderthals if these were peaceful animals. And here he said, to a certain degree, a mouthful, because one of the issues is, you'll see some movies out there or some vids where they show a guy, sneaking up on a donkey or on a horse or on a cow, and they see humans will sleep with anything. They get this notion. I want to see a human sleep with a lion, okay, a lioness, right? Or a female who allows to be, mounted by a lion out there in the wild. How about an alligator? Is that a good match there? Humans with alligators? So when we're talking about apex predators, and that's what Neanderthal was. Neanderthal was an apex predator. You have to consider him like a lion, like a alligator, like a shark. This guy was a top guy there. He went out for the kill. And you're saying that we just barge into his territory, knock on his cave door and say, hey, do you have some sugar? And while you're at it, do you mind if I sleep with your wife? And I'll let you sleep with mine, Is that the way it happened? It was all friendly like? And let me hunt in your hunting grounds. Let me catch some stuff here. Yeah, sure. Again, people don't understand the situation here. And so, I have a problem with humans sleeping with Neanderthals. And here, let me show you a little story. Okay, it's a love story, so you'll probably like this. Okay, here's a love story. Love story of two apex predators. Okay, apex animals. One is known as the lion, the other one's known as a tiger. And now they're in different habitats, but it turns out that the tiger decides to migrate, and he goes, to the Serengeti. Okay, plains there, and he goes into lion territory. Okay, now the first thing you got to think about is that the worst enemy of a lion is another lion. They kill each other. For the pride, for whatever, they got it in their genes. And the worst enemy of a tiger is a tiger. Okay? Turns out this tiger goes now into not a tiger territory, he goes into lion territory. Okay? Okay, he goes in there and he runs into lion territory, separated by time and habitat. Remember, these two animals, they have a common ancestor maybe 2-3 million years ago, and now, they're going to meet each other. You think there's going to be love at first sight, or are they going to try to kill each other? Which would you bet on out there in the wild? Okay, and they have different culture. The lion is a social animal. The tiger is a solitary animal. I think I have a picture here of that, yeah. See, lions live in packs, in prides they call them, right? And they have kids and so on. The tiger, he's a solitary animal. He's got several females out there, each one also individual, lives individually, and he goes and visits each one, okay? But the tiger and the tigress are lonely animals. They don't live in packs. They don't live in clans, okay? So keep that in mind as well, okay? Okay, they have little genetic compatibility because they do have ligers and tigons, and they look more or less like this, okay? You can see that there's a little bit of a mixture there. But of course, these animals that you see there, these sorry animals, they're grown in zoos. And they have the tiger mate with the lioness and the lion mate with the tigress, okay? Things humans do. And a lot of these animals are infertile, they come out, even though they're born sometimes, they don't reproduce. Some of them do apparently, but they have to mate, I think, with one of the purebreds. Okay, so that's not clear in all these cases. But anyways, how do you think that's going to last? You have these ligers and tigons. You think they're going to meet with another one like them and have more kids and more kids and more kids forever? Or is there something wrong eventually with these mixtures? Okay, so keep that in mind. Ask yourself that question. Okay, so turns out they don't fight, the tiger and the lion. They meet out there in the Serengeti and they decide to make love instead of war. Okay, and again, they end up with ligers and tigons. And so, but now we're going to try to explain the disappearance of the tigers. It turns out the tigers became extinct. And so now you come, 50,000 years later, and you try to explain that. You say, okay, the tigers came out of India, they mated with the lions in the middle of the Serengeti, they have two different cultures, they were separated genetically for hundreds of thousands of years, okay, but they get together, they have ligers and tigons, which apparently were infertile, okay, but we'll even concede that they were fertile, okay, just for the sake of argument. In order for you to explain why the tigers finally became extinct, you would have to have every single tiger mate with the lions. Because otherwise, if you have two tigers that mated, they would continue having tigers, and the tigers would still be around. If the tigers became extinct, it's because even to the last one that reproduced had to mate with a lion. It can't just be a one-night stand and this lion and this tiger over there. It's got to be the entire population eventually for all tigers to disappear. Otherwise, they will continue having tigers, and the tigers should still be around. Okay? So what I'm saying is that's what happened to the Neanderthals. If the Neanderthals would have mated with us, then every last one of them had to eventually mate with humans in order for their smaller population, as they say, maybe 10% of our population, to be diluted into our population, and eventually all Neanderthals disappeared. And again, one of the issues there is, what is a species? Were they the same species, or were the Neanderthals a different race? Because that's another issue that Dutton had in his mind. He talks about race, and I say race is a political word, a political issue. It has nothing to do with science. In science, we talk about species. That's objective. Either you can have children or you can't, viable children. And if you can't, then you're two different species. And so, this notion that these people have that they call introgression, which is nonsense, idiocy. It's idiocy because it violates the definition of the word species. They say introgression means that two different species mate and they have a child back again. And they use that as, try to explain why, some like humans have Neanderthal DNA because there was introgression, or the Denisovans and any of those hominids. And so they're saying essentially there's been introgression, meaning two species, different species, because again, what is a species? That can have viable children. If they can't, they're two different species. They're saying these two different species had a viable children, a viable child or whatever, and they're contradicting the definition of species. And again, all these people never define their terms properly, scientifically, so they get out through loopholes. That's the problem with by not defining their terms. So no, the word introgression should be deleted, or we have to clarify the difference between introgression and species. Those two words are contradictory. Okay? You can't use them both. One has to go out the door. Okay, so what happened to the Neanderthals? Well, again, we have a little bit of a problem because humans have no Neanderthal mothers. Okay, we have no mtDNA, no mitochondrial DNA no human has any mitochondrial DNA from Neanderthals. Mitochondrial DNA is passed down by the mother to her children, and we have none among humans today. And so they have to explain this, and this comes out of the Wikipedia, and it references several papers. I put 2 of them there, and it says, due to the absence of Neanderthal-derived mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down from mother to child in modern populations, it has been suggested that the progeny of Neanderthal females who mated with modern human males were either rare, absent, or sterile. That is to say, admixture stems from the progeny of Neanderthal males with modern human females. So the way they explain this today is that, we men, we were smart. We were smart. We had good eyesight, and we saw that monkey there, and we said, I'm not going to sleep with that monkey. But the women, our women, they're just whatever. Maybe they sold their bodies for, I guess a handful of seashells, and so the Neanderthal came over and said, hey, cutie, you want to sleep with me tonight? I'll give you all these seashells, these rocks. And she did it. That's what they're saying. We have no mothers, but apparently we have fathers. It turns out we don't have fathers either, because they could find no Y chromosomes from Neanderthals, which are passed from father to son. So it says, due to lack of Neanderthal-derived Y chromosomes in modern humans, which is passed on from father to son, it has also been suggested that the hybrids that contributed ancestry to modern populations were predominantly females, or the Neanderthal Y chromosome was not compatible with Homo sapiens and became extinct. Okay, and again, those are the references there. There's a couple more. You can look this up. So, let's see if I got this right. Humans don't have Neanderthal mothers because we have no mitochondrial DNA. Okay, great. We only have fathers. Turns out we have men today have no Neanderthal fathers because we have no Y chromosomes from Neanderthals. And still, in spite of these obvious pieces of evidence which they got out of the genome and so on, they keep saying, oh, but we interbred. Our forefathers interbred with Neanderthals. And they try to explain it away instead of taking the easy way, John of Occam's rule, take the easier path. They don't do that. They say, no, we have to prove interbreeding at all costs against all odds. And we had no Neanderthal mothers, we had no Neanderthal fathers, but we interbred with them. Yeah, sure. I think it's easier to suggest that we never had anything to do with the Neanderthals, okay, in bed. And so, yeah, again, it depends on what assumptions you make. And all this comes from the geneticists, and I explained that a couple of weeks ago, where the geneticists have taken over the Neanderthal paleontology business, and they call all the shots today. So the guy goes out there in the middle of the field, collects a bone, a paleontologist, Indiana Jones kind of style type of guy. He goes out to the middle of the mountains, dusts some bones off, brings them to the museum, assembles them, and he says, well, why did these guys disappear? What happened to them? And so they come up with all these theories. Well, it was the climate change. Maybe it was, we killed them. We went into their territories and started killing them. Maybe we outcompeted them. Maybe they couldn't stand, again, the cold, or who knows what happened. And the geneticist came over and says, oh, you guys are wrong. You know nothing. Let me tell you how they disappeared. They disappeared because they interbred with us. And here's the proof, 2% commonality in our DNA. And then they discover there's no mitochondrial DNA. We have no Y chromosomes, but we still intermarried because they have no other theory for extinction of the Neanderthals. And again, the question is, were the Neanderthals a different species? Could we have viable children, fertile children, or were our children sterile because we were so far separated, not so much in time, which is also an important factor, maybe 500, 6,000, 700,000 years ago, we had a common ancestor. But on top of that, the Neanderthals went to the Arctic Europe, And we were allegedly in Africa, unless you got a better mousetrap, you got a better theory, fine. But I'm saying right now that those are my assumptions. I'm saying humans, Cro-Magnons, right, our forefathers, they came out of Africa, they went into Europe. They couldn't get into Europe because they were killed by the Neanderthals. As long as the Neanderthals were there, the clans. Once the Neanderthals were gone, we were able to get into Europe, and that was approximately 40,000 years ago when we conquered the land, conquered Europe. And as we advanced, the Neanderthals were receding because they were dying. They were dying what? Because their population pyramid overturned. The Neanderthals disappeared in a population implosion. It happened within their own world. And we couldn't have interbred because there's another argument there as well, which is how did the Heidelbergers, Homo heidelbergensis, how did he disappear? Did he mate with Neanderthal? Is that how he disappeared? How did Homo erectus or Homo antecessor, how did he disappear? Did he mate with Homo heidelbergensis? Is that how species disappear? They mate with the next one down and they get diluted into a bigger population? Again, it shows that geneticists have a mental problem. Okay, that's the way I look at that. They know. See, a geneticist is not a scientist. He has nothing to do with science. A geneticist is a person who just counts atoms. He doesn't even do it like, with beads on an abacus. He's got a computer that reads all these billions of base pairs and so on and spits out the numbers and he can compare them. That's it. So he looks at that and says, okay, this one coincides here, this one doesn't coincide there. And so far, all he is a stamp collector. That's all he is up to that point. It's when he gives you an explanation, a physical interpretation of what happened. That's when he crosses the line into science. That's where he gives you the most irrational explanation he can come up with, interbreeding in this case. And at that point, you stop him. You say, you're not a scientist. A scientist only gives a rational explanation. And what these people have to do is not tell me what percentage of our genes are or DNA come from Neanderthals. What they have to explain is how did these two species do it in the wild and have a fertile offspring. That's what they have to explain. If they cannot explain that, whatever they come up with is garbage, absolute garbage. So they don't tell me that we have 2% DNA. I don't care about that. I want you to tell me how they did it in the wild, how a lion mates with a tiger in the wild. That's what you got to explain. If you can't explain that, because that's never happened for sure, or even other animals, you can pick the animal you want. It's never happened in the wild, okay? Because there's no need for a chimp to visit the gorilla territory and have sex with a gorilla. And again, there was no need for Neanderthals to have sex with humans. Did they have females in the Neanderthal world? Were they so sick of them? They want to divorce and they want to marry a human? Are you kidding me or what? So that's what you got to explain. Anyone who talks about interbreeding or admixture between Neanderthals and humans, don't tell me what percentage Neanderthal DNA we have. Tell me how they did it in the wild. These two apex predators, how they, became neighbors and lovers. That's what you got to explain. Okay, another fellow raises an issue, says there's an Italian author who hired an artist to draw his own design of a Neanderthal. Yeah, I don't think he's Italian. I think he's Australian, and Vendramini. And, I looked at his stuff a long time ago. I don't subscribe to almost anything he says except the fact that, Neanderthals were very different than us. That's true. But, he also believes in that we mated with them. So he says, we were so different that it's almost unbelievable, but we had children together. So, again, nothing different. Now the fellow raises the issue of Piltdown man. He said, prove the frailty of fossil reconstruction. Yeah, we have this guy, Charles Dawson. I think I talked about him in the past. And he played a hoax on the anthropology/paleontology world. He filed some teeth and so on. So he created these skeletons. And he said, I have a new species, just to get his name in lights. Then he died. He died shortly after. He made all these discoveries, and he had discoveries for many years, by the way. Not one, just many. There's like 70 or 80, frauds that he committed. And they went back and studied a lot of these, and they found out he was a total fraud. On the one hand, it's good because, it compels the paleontologists to be on their toes. Like, you can't just say anything you want, then later on discover that it wasn't like that, then you look like a fool. So now, if anything, this served to put the paleontologists on their toes. They have to be careful that someone doesn't put something out there that embarrasses them. Okay, fellow says, regarding the definition of life, which again is the opposite of death, which is extinction, right? Concerning your definition of alive, okay, it's an object that moves against the path of least resistance, okay, specifically gravity, okay, but yeah. Considered molecule for molecule, doesn't literally everything take the path of least resistance? And all I can recommend is you go to the river and swim against the current. You'll be able to swim against the current if it's not a strong current, you know. Rock can't do that. Okay, so just test it out for yourself, okay? Swim against the current, you'll find out that you can swim against the path of least resistance, something that a rock cannot do. Okay, again, we should do Extinction 101 before 102. That's one of the things that we did not do with Dutton. Okay? We should have done something like that. And there's a reason for that, okay? And I'm saying that first, before you can understand human extinction, you got to understand what a mass extinction is. And what has happened, no one has defined these terms. You know, like look at background extinction. What is a background extinction? Well, you look it up. Look up the term background extinction. You'll find it in the Wikipedia. And they talk about the background extinction rate. It's a rate. It's a mathematical thingy. And we don't know what a background extinction is, and they talk about the rate. No, so I had to define these terms because no one else did. And what is a background extinction? Background extinction is the disappearance of one species. Okay, that's what a background extinction is. Don't tell me what the rate is. Tell me the cause. Why does one species suddenly disappear from the record? You know, Neanderthal disappeared all by themselves. And you would think that woolly would have disappeared before Neanderthals because Neanderthals hunted woolies, well, the woolly mammoth, right? And it turns out that woolly outlived them by 20,000 years. How can that possibly be if Neanderthals hunted woolies? Well, maybe that's not how species disappear, you know, by overhunting. Maybe there's something else going on. And that would, you know, turn your lights on that something is not quite right in this notion that people have that we, for example, overhunted the Neanderthals, killed them. No, maybe the Neanderthal disappeared for something totally different that has nothing to do with overhunting or overpredation or whatever you want to call it. Okay, so yeah, Willie also disappeared all by himself. No one got rid of him. People say, well, yeah, we killed him. That's all they can think of. We killed the Neanderthal. We killed the Willies. We killed the passenger pigeon. We killed the great auk. We killed the tiger, the Tasmanian tiger. We killed them all. Yeah, sure. We're such mean people. The dodo bird, you know, we killed them all. So, so the question that I have put in the past is, why do animals on land disappear more or less at the same time as the animals in the seas? Because if we can figure that out, that issue, then maybe we get a handle on what causes extinction. Why? What underlies a mass extinction? Okay? And for that, I start with a definition. What is a mass extinction? And so we define the term, and the term is the disappearance of a food chain. Mass extinction, disappearance of a food chain. Now, I wonder why they disappear. Maybe it's got something to do with food. What do you think? Okay. And so, you got to answer the question why the animals on land disappear approximately at the same time as animals in the seas. And one guy gave it a shot, and he said, is the answer to your homework question about the sun or ground nutrients? Earth's surface nutritionally reaches critical mass approximately globally and needs to reboot. Thus, land and sea dies. And there I have this chart which I made, and that's that doesn't happen. See, and I'll just give an example there. When the ferns were dying out, the conifers were already expanding. So it's not like the land dried up and then, you know, God invented the new plants again, invented conifers. No, it was there's a period in which both plants are on the planet. One is disappearing, the other one is expanding. And what happened to the conifers is the same thing. Conifers expanded for, almost 200 million years between the Jurassic and the Cretaceous. And what happens? They're expanding, but at some point they start declining, and what's occupying the land, are the angiosperms. And so it's not like, there's a total wiping out of one plant and then the other one starts out or continues or whatever. No, one is already alive and expanding, radiating at the same time the other one is declining. Okay, that's the history of life on Earth. We find conifers together with ferns all the way to, the beginning of the Permian. Okay. Another fellow says that maybe it's the oxygen cycle. It says primary producers emit gases, mainly O2, due to photosynthesis, whereas consumers produce CO2 in turn, which is absorbed by primary producers, which are more numerous. And again, this is the oxygen cycle. Another fellow has essentially the same explanations. He says, I remember having read as a teenager that the first great mass extinction was caused by O2 emitting microorganisms, which was toxic for all anaerobic organisms, including themselves. Okay? Newer organisms, on the other hand, were able to adapt and thrived on oxygen, creating a new ecological pyramid. Maybe a similar phenomenon occurs in cycles. Yeah, I don't believe it's got to do with a carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, or oxygen cycle. The question of why animals on land disappear more or less at the same time as animals, in the seas. But a guy hit it pretty much on the nose, and I think I owe him a beer then. And this is what he said. He said, Extinction 101, primary food producers in sea and land spawned only a few million years apart. Okay? Hence, their evolutionary lifespan is similar, and hence, rate of loss of genetic diversity, including population pyramid overturn of the plants and phytoplankton, maybe even the other plankton as well, the zooplankton. They disappear more or less at the same time because they started out more or less at the same time. Is it because God ordained that? No, it's just because that's the history of life on Earth. There was a mass extinction more or less at the same time on land as in the seas. And then what started, the radiation that starts after that on land and in the seas more or less starts at the same time. So they have more or less the same amount of time to live until that collapses as well. And so we're talking about big orders of plants, okay? And it takes millions of years for them to live and finally die. Their population pyramid overturns. And so, yeah, this fella hit it pretty much on the nose, and I owe you a beer, guy. Whenever we meet, I owe you a beer. Okay? Take a rain check. Okay, here's the evolution of plants that supports that more or less. You can see that, again, this is the chart that I make regarding the big picture of what happened of life on Earth. And you can see that essentially, you can see the different ages. You had the Permian and Triassic, that's the age of synapsids, mammal-like reptiles. Those were the age of ferns, especially seed ferns. You had the Glossopteris in the middle of the Permian. I'm sorry, at the end of the Permian. And you had the dicroidiums that disappeared at the end of the Triassic. And so when those plants disappeared, it turns out, yeah, the animals disappeared together with them. And were the gymnosperms, were they born at that moment in time? No, the gymnosperms, the conifers, date all the way, I think even to the Carboniferous they found some, but for sure to the Permian. How about the angiosperms, the flowering plants? Well, they date to at least the middle of the Cretaceous. That's when they expanded, but you could take them all the way to Jurassic. So these plants lived together side by side, and the dinosaurs did not eat the angiosperms because they were born with conifers. There's no need for them to switch plants at the last moment, when the angiosperms are expanding at the expense of conifers, okay? Especially cycads and cycadioids and so on. Okay, final issue, fellow says, so my understanding of extinction was, referring to the Dutton talk the other day, that the cessation of technology to feed X billion causes a mass exodus that loots edibles beyond replenishment, resulting in chain extinction of human food sources. I don't think it's got to do with technology. It's got to do with the fact that no one produces the food, because right now we produce as much as we want. But the only reason we produce food is because of money, because of profits. And the agricultural corporations, as long as there are profits, they'll produce and distribute to the cities. But once money is no more, which is my argument, there's no need for these corporations to produce or distribute. And so the only issue we have to address then after that is, why will money disappear? Why will we refuse to accept money? That's the issue. Okay, so that's the one people want to get their brains around. Why would money disappear? But what I can guarantee to you is that if money disappears, right, for whatever reason, God comes in and waves his magic wand. I don't care. If money disappears, if we no longer accept money, okay, agricultural corporations will not produce food or distribute them to the cities. Without food, you are guaranteed to die. A mass extinction can be guaranteed if you remove the food from the planet. Okay? So what the problem is right now, we produce our own food, we take it for granted because you go to the store and you say, well, I got all the food I want. Yeah, now because someone is putting it on the shelf for you. Someone's doing the hunting for you. Okay, and they put with a golden spoon in your mouth. And the question is, if money is gone, if there are no more profits, no more Bitcoin, no more fiat coin, no more gold, we don't accept any of that stuff anymore. Paper, plastic, gold rocks, because gold is just a rock, diamonds. We don't accept any kind of money because food is the only thing of value, and the only thing you're going to accept is food, and no one trades food in the jungle. Then if no one produces or distributes food, you're guaranteed to die. And you have a mechanism of a mass extinction right there. Okay? What is a mass extinction? The disappearance of a food chain.